My name is Gordon Glasgow, and ever since the passage of No Child Left Behind, there has been tremendous emphasis from the federal government on the use of standardized testing in the schools. And even though there have been some modifications to this over the years, it's still at a point where some of the schools are spending as much as 30 days out of a 180-day school year in testing, taking practice tests, taking tests to prepare for the practice test, to prepare for the real test. Do you believe that this level of testing is an appropriate use of resources, or should those resources be focused back on actually providing education to the students? That's for both.
Candidate Ramos.
No, I don't think we need to be testing for a test. I mean, the whole purpose of going to school is to learn, not to be taking a test. We do need tests to realize, hey, are you actually learning? Where are you at? But it shouldn't be our main focus, and we shouldn't be teaching to take that test. I know my nieces and nephews are going through this, and I just can't imagine that what they're going through, because we didn't go through this. I mean, I think it came out okay. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but no, standardized testing is not what we should be doing. We should have less standardized testing, but we do need a standard to make sure that they are meeting the minimum education goals. And I do support the new ESSA law. So.
Candidate Skold.
When you have constant testing going on in classrooms, the students are stressed. The teachers, when they have that much at risk with the test, that their performance is rated on the test, they start teaching to the test. And it really doesn't make sense, because if you have an excellent teacher who's given the most difficult students because she's so good at teaching, and her performance is, evaluation is tied to the results of those tests, based on this is passing, this is not passing, that's not good for the students, it's not good for the teacher, because now we are rating a very excellent teacher as a failing teacher, and she could even lose her job. It has happened. So no, I don't support standardized testing to that extent. We do know that testing, assessment drives instruction. So you do have to have some testing, but you don't have to have 20 or 30 days of testing. That takes away from the holistic education, an education that is not teaching to the test, but rather teaching to the environment of the student.
Hi, Chris Hansen, LD45. 2 questions. So one of them, the first one was really short. Should be a really short answer for both of you. We've talked about, or you have talked about, healthcare and single payer, ACA, what is best. I guess my question regarding that is, how do either of you or do both of you consider healthcare to be a right? I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. Is it a right? Is it a right that we all have, is to quality healthcare?
Yes.
I guess you went first, I'll go second. Okay, yes.
It doesn't matter to me. Second question for both candidates again. Looking at the top of the ticket and kind of looking at how the winds are blowing, it looks like there's going to be some compromise reached on college tuition-free college. It's kind of the way the winds are blowing. So I would ask each of you, what would be your preferred method for funding a tuition-free college at public universities?
Candidate Skold.
Tuition-free college, we have had community college free in the past, and it was because our state budgets paid for that. This can be a state topic. New York paid for their community college, for example. So I would like to see, first of all, we need to fund K-12, and then we need to fund K-14, and then we need to fund K-16. And if we try to do that with the current budget, we're having a tough time with K-12. So what we need to do, and I would work with for example, Senator Bob Hasegawa on the public bank. That's on the state level. And I can help him with my connections in the private sector to have them support the public bank that would help fund education, K-12, K-14, K-16, as well as provide loans to students at low interest rates We have a successful model of the public bank in North Dakota. It would be very helpful for Washington State as well.
So, funding the free college, I'm in favor of doing the 2-year free college, and I think we can do it by closing the corporate loopholes at the national level. There's a lot of corporations out there who are getting a lot of breaks that should not be getting them. I believe we should be sunsetting all the corporate tax breaks and figuring out if they're needed eventually. This thing that automatic renewed, but the minimum wage needs to be debated constantly. No, we need to look at sunsetting the corporate tax breaks.
Carl Spitzer. There's been an awful lot of funding increase talk here, and their taxes were briefly mentioned, but we also briefly mentioned reducing the deficit. I mean, how are we going to do this? Are we going to increase taxes, or are we going to look at our budget and realize that we are spending huge amounts in the defense part of our budget and make some cuts there?
Candidate Ramos.
Yeah, we got to look at the defense budget. I don't believe we should cut it immediately because that would be detrimental to the economy. There's ways to start cutting the funding by reducing the increase amount. And we also got to start going back to the corporate loopholes. You got to be able to put a sunset provision and get a fair system. You know, I've made, as a commercial real estate agent, I made a lot of people a lot of money with commercial deals, and then they feel they didn't have to pay their fair share of taxes. That's wrong. You know, we need to look at those tax breaks for the people that can afford it at the top. Trickle-down economics doesn't work. So we need to look at those corporate rates, and then also the personal tax brackets.
Candidate Skold.
The top 1% of our country in 1979 earned 10% of our nation's wealth per year. 35 years later, in 2014, they're earning 21% of our nation's wealth each year. That's not a sustainable trend. We need to look at the tax structure, because in addition to our shrinking middle class, we are also asking our middle class to carry more of the public systems by taxing them more. We need to rewrite the tax code so that it's fair and equitable, so that the top 30% are paying more in taxes and carrying their fair share. Because while that increased wealth that they're receiving each year, while that continues going up, their tax responsibility tends to go down. That's not right, that's not fair. And if we continue doing that, it's not sustainable. And our public systems are showing that, because Social Security is, they're wondering if it can be funded beyond a certain point, and we need to take care of Social Security and other public systems.
Hi, I'm Zach. So I'm wondering, right now partisan deadlock is extremely bad in Washington, D.C. And both of you have laid out some lovely programs that'd be great to actually get implemented. But once you hopefully, either one of you, get to Washington, D.C., how do you plan to push through legislation and maybe even work with the other side?
Bookend.
Candidate Skold.
Excellent question, because that is so important. President Lincoln told us a house divided cannot stand. Our Congress is showing us that that's true, because they rather shut down Congress and not govern the country than agree on a budget. When that costs $24 billion in order to do that, how is that making sense that they shut down the government rather than agree on a budget? So I have very strong negotiating skills developed through co-founding a commercial real estate portfolio. I know how to negotiate. I know how to cross the aisle. An example of that is that I'm already doing that is when I went into Wenatchee, and when I would walk into the media outlets, the Wenatchee World, the KPQ Radio, the various others, they would always tell me, you know, this is a very Republican district, right? and they were shocked that I wanted to talk to them, and I made it clear it's very important to maintain that open line of communication. And they wrote very good articles, and now I'm also going to be on a talk show and get the word out. We're working together on this. We're not enemies in the United States. We want to work together and keep our country functioning.
Candidate Ramos?
Just want to make sure, Zach, you said Congress is deadlocked, right? That's what you're talking about? Is that right? Congress deadlock, okay. How am I going to get legislation passed? Well, first we got to make sure we change, I'm hoping to change the Speaker of the House so we can actually have legislation that can come to the floor and have a vote. If that doesn't happen, and then, when I'm in Congress, you got to look at how can you build those bridges with opposing side, and look at who do you agree with. I mean, every board that I've been in, I sit down and listen and figure out, hey, what's their backstory? What do they need? What do they want? Before you come in and start telling everybody, hey, this is what you got to do. When you come in as a freshman, you got to go in there and listen. I'm very good at listening to other folks and understanding, hey, this is your concern, even though you might not agree with me 100%, but we can agree on this part of the issue. Let's move on from there. I have a lot of Republican friends and coming from a business background, and they're supporting me. A couple of them said, you know what, you're the first Democrat I'm giving money to, and I'm going to vote for you in the primary.